Welcome to the Essence of Homeschooling podcast, brought to you by the umbrella school, Statheros Academy. We empower and equip you to cultivate the authentic homeschool lifestyle where freedom and relationships rule.
Welcome back to the Essence of Homeschooling podcast. I'm Kim Almas, and I'm here with my friend Michelle Moore here tonight. This week, we decided to talk a little bit about learning styles and preferences. Another member of our team, Stacy Allen, posted a great visual in our Facebook group, The Essence of Homeschooling, that was a quick guide to learning styles or preferences. So we thought we would talk a little bit about that tonight because it's a good way to help you understand the people in your life, whether it's your kids or other people that you're working with. It's a really interesting topic that goes back many years from when I was first teaching, and way before that, I'm quite sure. One of the earliest books out there on this topic was The Way They Learn by Cynthia Tobias. It was my first introduction to that back in the early 90s. Do you remember that book, Michelle?
I do.
Yeah, and it was eye-opening. Right now, these days, it seems a little bit basic with everything else that has come out, but really, there are some very good foundational concepts that we thought we'd talk about tonight.
Yes, and in that, we wanna break it out into 2 main ideas here, and then each of those have many points underneath them, but there's ways for input, ways information gets into our children's hearts and minds, and then there's output, ways that they can show us how they have learned certain things. And their learning style does not necessarily correspond with the way they're going to output information. But we'll get to that just as a teaser. It's input and output.
Right,
So,
to break it down.
and the various inputs, just as a quick one, are the main 4 are the visual, auditory, verbal, and kinesthetic or physical. But let's start with visual. Kim, what is that like?
So that's one that's probably one of the most common, and it's just simply learning by seeing or watching someone or something else. Most typically, we think of simply reading something. If you're a visual learner, you probably are a good reader. A lot of times, these kiddos are very good at seeing something in their mind's eye. Believe it or not, everybody can do that. That was new information to me as a young teacher, but being able to see something in your imagination, that would be a visual learner. And these kiddos work really well when they have illustrations to look at, diagrams, that type of thing, or any kind of written instructions. And then, of course, these days, we also think of videos. Videos are a great way for your kids to learn, of course. In fact, I know a lot of times over the years, I've thought maybe it should be its own learning style, but honestly, that's just one of those things that it's a great tool, and you want to use that with discernment, of course, but I think it definitely falls under the visual learner category.
Our auditory learners are the ones that learn by hearing. They're the ones who probably would rather have you read aloud than they read to themselves. They would enjoy audiobooks. They learn well by listening to music or singing along, and discussion-based classes would be really good for them.
Learning with those times tables, tapes in your car, states and capitals, CDs, whatever.
We
All
just
that.
dated ourselves.
We just did, yeah. Anything like that. Does the Socratic discussion fit in there, or would that be more in the verbal processing?
I think that's a great question because really what we have to understand is a lot of these overlap.
Yeah.
Right, and using multiple learning styles is going to help our kids be able to be better learners. And so I think it's one of those overlaps. I think it's auditory because they have to hear, right? They have to capture the questions in a discussion to be able to bring in their viewpoint without totally changing the subject. And
Mhm.
so then that would hit the verbal, who process by speaking. So it combines the 2, I think, pretty well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Another example of the crossover would be when we're teaching our kids how to spell. A lot of times we'll have them write the word down, say it out loud, speak the letters as they write them down. If they make a mistake, write on top of it with a colored pencil and with the correct letters. So they're hearing themselves, they're seeing themselves write things down. So you're getting a lot of crossover there as well.
So that's interesting. The verbal will be one that crosses over probably into all of them, even with the visual. In the visual, even learning by videos, you still have to process auditorily.
Yes.
And then if you make your own, you're verbal in that. Sometimes people put writing in as the verbal skill
Mhm.
because, and it is kinesthetic because forming letters is a different skill than thinking of a paper, than thinking of a story. But a verbal processor may need to write it all out so that they have, in a way, spoken to themselves about what is important and what they have learned. So that
Mhm.
kinesthetic learner is the learner, the ones who learn by doing. They're constantly in motion, but not always. They're the ones who might have to move around more when you read aloud. They're
Mhm.
the ones who may have to touch a painting, not in the art museum, of course. They like the tactile, so the sense of touch is very important. They're the ones who may have to bounce on the trampoline to tell you their times tables
Mhm.
or to work on their spelling.
Those are all examples.
Yeah, the big learn by doing, and I think of it, I'm often this way. I have to be doing something. If someone teaches me how to sew and gives me a pattern, I'm not that visual learner. So that pattern's not going to help me. I'm going to need them to talk me through some of it, but I need to get my hands on it and I have to do it. So that kinesthetic learner is really in motion and has to be doing it for it to connect all of the information into their brain.
Mhm. And sometimes with little ones, it can be something as simple as clapping along. Let's say you're learning a memory verse and you clap along with the words, or you're learning how to figure out syllables in a word. You clap the syllables, things like that can be very helpful. Drama is also very kinesthetic, obviously, as well. Acting
Very
something
good.
out.
Excellent. Those are the main 4, but as homeschoolers, we often want to offer our kids opportunities to grow in these styles through group learning and independent learning. Some people would even say these are learning styles, the interpersonal and the intrapersonal. So the interpersonal is going to be more social. They need to be in groups. And there's positive peer pressure in that to learn from each other.
That works really well if you have maybe a bigger family or you're working with a co-op or something like that. A lot of times it helps if you say you're giving instructions and you want to really make sure your kids or your group of kids that you're with have gotten that, have received it. Have them tell their neighbor, have them tell their sibling, or have them just simply tell it back to you. Now, what are we going to do on this page? And have them repeat back to you. Working together like that in a team is super helpful. Group projects, sometimes they get a bad rap because one person might end up doing all the work, but the workaround that for that type of thing is that everybody gets a job in your group, and you
Mm.
can figure out what those jobs are ahead of time. One person might be the scribe, they're going to write things down. Another person might be the artist, another person might be they're going to build something, whatever it is their strengths are. And this is great. There's real world collaboration here, real world application in that they are learning to collaborate with each other. Skill to tap into there.
Right. The life skill in that is super important because there's nowhere we really go that we don't have to work with people at some point. But then also that intrapersonal, the solitary learning. the ones who need time alone. And really, we might say these are your extroverts and your introverts, but it's not all that. Even an extrovert needs time alone to let information that they've learned work out in their brain. Some of
Mhm.
that can be staring at the clouds, right? Being outside in nature and really processing the other things you have learned, even if you're not really paying attention to the clouds. It's that being out in nature and being solitary and taking time to be quiet is a really important skill to learn how to be silent, especially in our world that is very driven by sound and different distractions, whether it's visual or it's auditory distraction. To be able to have that time in quiet is also a way information starts to soak into their minds.
Oh, absolutely. Super important. I remember I was hiking with my boys one day up in the foothills in Boulder, Colorado, and we came across a group of kids who I don't know what kind of school group they were with, but anyway, they were extraordinarily quiet for a group of children. And I spoke to one of them and I said, "Oh, are you a school group or what are you doing?" He whispered to me, "Yes, but we're supposed to be very quiet." And so I got the message, okay, I'm not supposed to talk around it so they could listen. And that's what their teacher was doing. I thought, this is fantastic. Their teacher was having them just sit in nature, lie down on the ground to feel the earth and just listen and observe. And it was really very memorable and I think very meaningful.
It's also neat because there is something about nature that in itself is has calming elements to it.
Mhm.
What are the sound machines a lot of people use? It's the nature sounds.
Right.
It's waterfalls, it's rain, it's things like that are calming so that we can relax. And a relaxed learner actually will learn better. One who's really stressed and tense is going to have a hard time keeping the information in their brain.
100%. Absolutely. This it kind of makes me think too of the COVID years. A lot of
Mhm.
people used that time to really tap into learning something new, whether it was sourdough bread, that was the big thing, or whatever it was, whatever kind of now they had time to work on some hobbies or some new skills, things like that. Not everybody tapped into it, but those who did, I think came out the better.
Mhm. And we'll find that kids are stronger in one area than another,
Mhm.
whether it's interpersonal or intrapersonal, whether they prefer to be in a group or or alone. And that's their natural wiring. But it's really important to stretch our kids a little bit more each year in the part they're weak in so that they can grow in it because we need both of those skills as adults. And so being able to handle a group of people, being able to handle a small group of people, being able to be alone, each of those things really matter and are important for our well-being. I guess this brings us to output. So, all of this, right? Information comes in many forms. The way we need to grasp information has its many ways. The auditory, kinesthetic, however, information needs to come into us. But there's a way to measure information. And our public schools tend to have one way, right? Test taking.
Mhm.
That's for your possibly visual learner, verbal learner. It's not a whole lot for your kinesthetic learner. Lately, we've had conversations about that there are multiple forms of intelligence, that it's not just a learning style, but intelligence comes in more than one way. And the beauty of homeschooling is we can allow our kids output in the ways that they are naturally inclined towards. So a test is going to look different for each of these different intelligences?
Welcome to Statheros Academy. We are an umbrella school that fulfills legal reporting requirements for homeschoolers in Colorado. But all of our services like transcripts, diplomas, IDs, and coaching are available no matter where you live. Don't forget to check out our store for homeschool essentials like attendance logs, planners, report cards, and DIY high school transcripts. Whether you need help with paperwork, planning, support, or guidance on your homeschool journey, Statheros Academy is here to support you. Visit theumbrellaschool.com to learn more.
This really speaks to what I do as an evaluator as well, because, like you said, in public schools, what do? They have the standardized testing, fill in the bubbles, end of every year or periodically. And with evaluations, we have the freedom to branch out, and the kids can show me the information that they've learned in so many different ways. You'd be surprised at how many different kinds of work samples I've received. It's weird even to think of them as work samples sometimes, because they're just sharing what they've learned and what they love and what they know. And it becomes fun and life giving and lifestyle, like the homeschool lifestyle that we talk about so much.
And that makes me think of, in a lot of ways, you're getting some people who are word smart, right? They're the linguistic. They're the ones who have a broad vocabulary. They might be good at foreign languages. They might be good at their writing samples that they give you.
hmm And those kinds of kids might do really well on a written test. And that's great. If that's the type of thing that you do well, that's terrific. There are definitely other ways, though, to show that you're smart. Let's skip over to logic smart with the math. So you've got the word smart. A lot of times we think of this as right brain, left brain kind of thing,
Mhm.
math versus reading. But the logic smart, that's going to touch on the math, of course, your physical and your chemical sciences, things like programming, computer programming. It's that sequential kind of part of your brain, that sort of logic piece.
And so their output may come in certain styles of graphs to
hmm
show what they've learned. Even in English, it may still come out much more sequential than as a story. But then I'm sure you get many people who are artistically smart,
Oh, yes,
and you get work samples, I'm sure, that show up in variety of ways. What are those like?
I sure do. Beautiful classic art that you think of where a child has drawn a picture with oil pastels, something like that, or watercolor. Sometimes sculpture, sometimes things like dioramas, posters, even anything like that. Any kind of way that they view the world in pictures in a way, and they're able to express that to the rest of us in a way that they can't necessarily find words for. Like a picture's worth a thousand words, right? So they do really well with things like that.
And then even though music, I think, falls a little bit into artistically smart, but I think that's still a different skill set. Somebody who's musically intelligent is able to learn through song, but then express through song as well, and maybe need to make up little jingles so they can remember, or the mnemonics,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yes, definitely. And that, I think we know that music and math are related as well. So I think there's some
Mhm.
crossover there too.
That's great. And then I think of the nature smart,
Right.
those who are skilled with anything to do with the outdoors, just have a sense of where they are in the world, but literally out in the world. They know their directions, north, south, east, and west. They may be your 4-H students who would be able, their studies have to be integrated with nature. The natural sciences, they're good with pets, maybe landscaping and gardening. And this made Kim and I think of a few people. like John Muir or Jane Goodall, who was the one who studied the apes in Africa.
And I thought of Temple Grandin, the lady in Colorado who is autistic, and she's known for having such a tremendous impact in the world of humane treatment for livestock.
Hmm.
And she wrote many scientific papers on animal behavior. Just a fascinating character. There's a pretty fascinating movie about her. It was put out recently. So definitely nature smart.
And historically, we have John James Audubon, who the whole Audubon Society is named off of him. And he was the one who drew all the birds so people could understand and learn about the world around them. And these are just some of the easy ways to show output is through different things in nature, whether it's your gardening, whether it's music, various artistic things, your logic with your math and your sequential brain, or with your words, your whether it's foreign languages or storytelling or your large vocabulary. We have to remember that there's also other ways people are really smart and it matters. If they're self smart, if they really know who they are and they're self motivated and they're not easily swayed by those around them, they know their own mind.
Right. They're going to be good leaders.
Hmm. And then how about those who are body smart?
Right.
I often think of athletes in this. They know where they are in space and how to use their body well. We know the difference from having a variety of kids, right? Some that just would run into more things. They just weren't as aware of where their body was. But we see this in the professional athletes, the way they can use their body, the one who can reach up and catch a pass with one hand, and just the way they can handle their body to make it do what they've stretched it to do.
Which we saw all summer with the Olympics.
Mm.
Just fascinating. Some people are just built that way.
They are. It's just a natural thing. And then there are people who are built as really people smart. And we often think of this as the emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
They're able to read or feel a room. They can gauge moods. They can walk into a room and go, okay, something's wrong. Or, wow, I'm so glad everybody's so happy in here.
Yeah.
They catch the nuance of facial expressions, body language, and they're able to really read what's going on.
And sometimes that not everybody has that. It really does have to be taught. And
Mhm.
some people really are just genuinely very good with that. It's it's a skill, it's a gift.
It is a skill. And for those self smart, body smart people, the output is certainly not going to look like a regular test or
Right.
a writing sample or even an artistic sample, right? You're going to have to help them think of ways that they can prove what they've learned. And of course, some of that body smart is kinesthetic, right? They could create a dance, build a diorama, perform an experience. They can use their body in ways. And just because they aren't going to have the same visual output that a lot of others will have does not mean that they're not intelligent, does not mean that they're not capable. And that's a very important thing to remember when you look at each of your kids. Evaluate where their intelligence really is and try to key into it. But yes, we homeschool and we still need to stretch them in all these little ways because the world still needs things in certain ways. You still want your athletes to know how to balance their checkbook.
Right.
How many professional athletes have gotten in trouble with finances because they didn't know what to do with it? And too many people were telling them what to do with it.
Right.
They need a people smart, good friend, and they need to be self smart as well. So there's a lot of ways these will overlap, and they're really important to to stretch, but your kids are going to have a natural bent.
As you're working with them, circling back to the four main styles of learning, you just want to think, what is the best way that my child initially can show me what they've learned, what they know, and think, are they a little more visual? Are they a little bit more verbal or auditory? Or are they more kinesthetic? And because they're probably going to lean a little bit harder on at least one of those things. So that would be your starting point of awareness of how to work with your child, and not just assume everybody's going to do great sitting in front of a worksheet and filling in the little bubbles. So just toss that idea out the window and just brainstorm. Just do a little brain dump on your paper, on your computer. What are different ways my child could show me that he or she knows this information? The verbal, the auditory, your child could be the teacher. They could teach back to you or to their siblings or somebody else. They might want to sing a song. Like, how many of us have learned the preamble to the Constitution thanks to Schoolhouse Rock? We could start singing it now if we wanted to. Things like that.
You don't want me to.
No. But it's think in terms of how can you best help your child share their knowledge. And it might even be something as simple as, tell me what you learned today over the dinner table. Tell your dad, tell your cousin, tell your grandma, what did you learn today? Just in a real casual kind of way. And that's okay.
And that's the output for the verbal auditory are going to overlap. So both of those go for each of those styles. For your kinesthetic learner, an output could be, as I mentioned before, and Kim did as well, build a diorama, make a game, perform the experiment, show us the process of the experiment. And then you can then help them fill out a lab report based upon how they did their experiment. But
Mhm.
they're getting their hands dirty and doing it, and maybe doing it as well, oftentimes. They can even create a dance. Any way they choose drama was one we mentioned too for the kinesthetic learner. Of course, that gets your verbal auditory as well because they're speaking and they're bouncing off of the others in the play.
Right.
There's many ways to do that.
And anytime you really can overlap, that's fantastic. That's ideal. But don't be surprised. I guess what we're saying, don't be surprised if your child does have a strength in one particular area. And if you need to roll with that primarily for a while, that's okay.
And so then for your visual learner, an output could be PowerPoints, art projects, posters, even videos, even a timeline, because they need to see how that fits all together. But then, as a caution, I would say for all of these is just be aware just because they have one input style does not mean it's going to be their output style. So if they're a visual learner, they may need to be a verbal output. They need to tell you. They may need to be the teacher. They may need to write the story. They may need to build a diorama. It's playing with those different things, but these inputs and outputs are so important for an education and for our kids, even us as adults. We have to process these different things in a wide variety of ways.
Mm.
But it's super helpful to remember that there's many forms of intelligence, not just what the public school says is intelligent or the private school, but what society actually needs from people. And look at the variety we have in society with our athletes, with our performers, with our teachers, with our mathematicians, and our writers. We need all this variety that each person has.
And I think it's just good to know that it's okay to think outside the box.
And that's what we already do as homeschoolers, right? We already jumped outside the box to begin
Right.
with. All of this helps us understand our kids and helps us make choices when deciding what each child needs for their education, for curriculum, for classes, for projects, for extracurriculars. So we wanted to start here, but stay with us because in the next few episodes, we'll talk about curriculum. Probably break it up through elementary, middle school, and high school. So there will be a few podcasts coming. But please pay attention to these various inputs and outputs and intelligences that each of your kids have and enjoy teaching to their style.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. Be sure to check out today's show notes for all applicable links and additional resources. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Your support helps us continue to bring you great content. Until next time, happy homeschooling!